and welcome to the In a Nutshell podcast with myself, Andrew Miles Davis, and my co-host, Chris Branch. This is the daily 10-minute podcast where we take out all of the techie talk around generative AI and focus on what the everyday person, content creator, and marketer wants to hear. Now, we've only got 10 minutes, so we can only focus on one particular subject. And today we're going to talk about an interesting subject because it kind of goes into some of the things we used to speak about in some of our earlier podcasts. And that was to do with certain platforms, especially startup platforms, and how are they going to protect themselves from when, two things really, when the big boys start saying, actually, that's a feature, let's bring it into what we do. So for example, a lot of the early startups would be AI generated presentations. So you can type in a prompt and it will create a presentation for you. Now you can put that in Copilot, or if you can't do it now, you'll be able to do it soon. So Copilot, if you don't know, you can use it for Microsoft PowerPoint. So you just type in a prompt and it creates a presentation. So that's one area when the big boys get into it. The second area is when everything becomes open source. Now, Chris, you can kind of explain into a bit more detail what open source is, but this is really what we want to look at today. How do these startups pivot? So Chris, first off, before we kind of get into how, do you want to quickly explain why open source will impact everything? So what is open source and how it will impact small startups?
Yeah, so the difference in open source and closed source is simply that everybody who is a user of that platform can contribute to it if they have the skill set to do so. So, it's much more enticing for a developer to go and work in a platform that they can actually have some change in, or contribute something useful to, as opposed to just using somebody else's technology and dealing with whatever they give you. Now, open source is really interesting in the AI space because it's as capable as closed source in many cases. The only place that we haven't seen it as capable of is in the size of the trillions of weights that OpenAI has done with GPT-4. And that's just simply because there's not enough funding in order to get an open source model to be trained on that amount of stuff.
So before we continue, so what you mean essentially is where OpenAI, I put the word open in quotes, OpenAI is essentially it's technology that they've built. Open source would be, we've built this technology, but we're going to add to it. So it's almost like
free for the public to access.
Yeah, free for the public to access and even almost manipulate it in a way that you want to work it for yourself.
Yeah, and you can see everything, the way it was built, the skeleton, you can see how it works. And Elon, when he purchased Twitter and then changed it to X, actually did this with Twitter. He published the algorithm and how it works. And before that moment, every creator on Twitter was just working to a black box because no one actually understood how it works. And this is the way in every other social media. Like no one knows how LinkedIn truly works or YouTube truly works, or you can be guests and you can do really well like Mr. Beast, but they don't actually know what's behind the curtain. And this open source, there is no curtain. You get to understand every single thing that's happened in this project, and there's no guessing at any of it. And it's a fundamental scare to the businesses that are trying to make profit from having something that is closed off to the community in order for them to contribute. Like Midjourney right now is completely closed. No one knows how Midjourney works, only the people that made it. No one can make any changes to how it works, only the people who made it. Whereas Stable Diffusion is a project owned by everyone in the world that uses Stable Diffusion, and you can tweak it however you like. They show you how they originally created it, and therefore you can add your things on top of it to make it your own. And that's a very different experience.
Yeah. So when it comes to as we said, there's two ways that it could affect startups. If it's open source, someone can use let's say a platform that's open source and they can create their own version of a translator or own version of a image generator. So that's essentially why these organizations, there's two things to worry about. Now, what you're going to find, what we think actually will have to happen is some of them will have to pivot because of these two areas, the big boys and things being open source. Now, some of the ways that we're seeing some of these companies pivot is actually quite interesting.
Very
So, for
crazy.
example, there's a couple of companies out there that, let's say they've got, let's say, text to video. That's what they're about. It's text or a prompt to create a video.
Mhm.
What they're doing is actually becoming an agency. So they're working with big brands and they're saying, look, rather than get someone else to do, essentially use our product and then send it to you, why don't you just work with us?
Mhm.
So they actually become an agency, and they'll probably get a lot more money via the agency route than getting hundreds or thousands of people subscribing for £100 a month, when they could probably get £100,000 a month from a big brand to do what they're doing. So that's one interesting way that they're starting to pivot.
Definitely. And like they're trying to engross themselves, especially the video platforms, in the actual industry by hosting film competitions as well. And that's a very smart move, because obviously you want to encourage people that this is technology made for you and not against you, because that's the big thing. Is lots of these directors that are anti-AI say this is coming to replace our jobs, and they're going, no, we want actual directors like you using this technology to submit to this competition, and you can get real prizes of tens of thousands of dollars. So they've really they've approached the right people too. Like they've been sponsored by Coca-Cola Runway to do their stuff, and other brands out there. So they're really doing this properly. You know, it's not just some fancy film festival that's internally for a marketing hype. It's no, we really want to be the next Sunrise, you know, like Sundance Film Festivals, independent films. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think interesting the way they're doing it, the way they're pivoting, the way that they're essentially building communities as well, because that's going to play a big part for success. Because when a lot of them will probably, obviously there's the unicorn Facebook or some of the other organizations like the OpenAI, where you kind of go from startup to billion-dollar organization. A lot of them are probably built so people can buy them. And when you start looking at the assets, obviously there's the code, but one big part of the assets will be the community and also obviously clients. So again, if you're kind of a small startup and you're working with different agencies, and those agencies are using your product, then it's actually, you're going to be very, very appealing to bigger agencies that will actually say, let's just buy you. That means we can bring the product in-house and also some of your clients as well.
Exactly.
So I can see that being like a huge thing for these startups.
Me too. Like, especially think about the endorsements. And we were talking about this off camera, but one of the biggest trends we've seen so far with the video platforms is that they're doing music videos. Now, imagine you are a cool independent film technology company and you can associate yourself with Linkin Park, or, you know, some big band out there that's got massive appeal and their own audience. You're going to draw in a whole load of new eyeballs and, you know, interest from people just because now you're associated with doing a Linkin Park video or something like that. Like, that may be the thing everyone knows Runway for. It's like, oh, they were the guys that made the Linkin Park video, weren't they? You know, like, you can really catapult yourself to a bigger community by doing these partnerships. So very smart marketing.
Yeah. I think that's gonna have to be the way. So if you're a small startup if you're a small startup working in this AI space right now, it's what is the pivot? You know, what is the thing that you can do that almost, obviously you've got your product itself, but what is the other thing that you can do to potentially protect yourself? Because the big boys are coming, you know, it's just a matter of time. Apple recently announced that they're getting into this space, and the next iPhone updates will include AI. Obviously Samsung's already kind of being in there, Google's doing this, Amazon's doing that, Meta's doing this, and you know, everyone's kind of entering this space. 2024, as we predicted, will be the year of the big boys. But then, as I said, that open source area as well, you know, what you've created where 3 or 4 of you, other people can create. So again, what is the thing that you can do to kind of really like almost build your asset, which is obviously your company and everything that's connected to it.
Exactly. We just want you to future-proof yourself so that you can stay afloat.
Yeah.